have going on now, we would probably lean towards maybe going a little bit closer on the operation side than the bond side, but still being able to do something that would be a sizable investment. And then in a few years, when that 4 cents dedicated levy comes off, perhaps roll that into a bond as well and have another additional investment in facilities. Because one of the things that we have looked at as we kind of map out our needs over the next few years and kind of that 2026 range, it looks like we may need to be doing about $30 million worth of HVAC work all at once, because it's like all the work that we did in 2000 and shortly thereafter, we're going to be in a position where we're going to need to replace stuff in about 2026, kind of in that range. So I know that's kind of a lot. We looked at, in terms of comparable data, and you look at, okay, we've not had a significant investment in facilities since 2000. What have other people across the county been doing? Well, Rockwood's the high at $455 million since 2001. They're about double our size. Parkway's done about 302. Hazelwood about 294. Lindbergh about 195, and Ladue about 188. And then if you look at our just our neighbors, Afton, Bayless, and Hancock have all done the $20 to $25 million range, despite being significantly smaller. So I know that's kind of a lot. We'll try to answer any questions that you might have.
Dr. Gaines, you talked about possibly going to the voters in November, and also talked about with the COVID-19 bringing the number down. Are you also thinking about possibly having to push that back to the spring?
Well, November's just the earliest we can go to the voters. That's really where the November comes from. It would, in my mind, it would be kind of more up to a campaign committee of whether they think that we could be more successful in November or in April. I will say, if we win in November and we weren't successful, we do it. That leaves April as a backup date. And the election data that I've seen from the beginning or from earlier on was that we're historically more successful in November. Kevin may know a little bit more of that data since he was a little bit more engaged in that last time.
I'd have to go back and take a look through that to be sure, but I think in general we have tended to do pretty well there.
Dr. Gaines, where are we at from a standpoint of, I just want to make sure I understand, if we're going, are we just going for an election for the bonds and we feel like the remaining operating levy just rolls over and we maintain that? Or is there an election item that we need to deal with there?
So good question, Mark. We absolutely have to go to the voters for the bond. We believe the votes in 2008 and 2015 put us in a position where we could roll the full 45 cents over to operations. But we have to have a vote to do a portion of that as a bond, because only the voters can authorize us going into that debt.
At that point in time, do you ask for two pieces of it? Let's say you end up doing 25 cents for the bond and the rest of it for operations. Would there be two initiatives, or do you just put the bond on there and then just roll over the remaining balance without a vote?
You just put the 25, you put whatever the pennies are on the bond, and the remaining part, the board does by a vote when they set the tax rate. and the placement of the tax rate.
So essentially, the benefit of doing the bond at that time, you get a large chunk of money to invest immediately, I'm assuming, rather than just rolling the whole amount over to operations and dedicating our maximum allocation that we can to facilities each year. I'm assuming that's why we'd go that way and incur that extra interest.
Correct. So we had run the numbers kind of once on the 70, it would take us, if we put 25 cents, to use that as an example, would generate, in October, it would have generated a $75 million bond issue. On the operations side, if we put 25 cents in capital, it would generate $4.5 million a year. So it would take 20 years to kind of make the investment that you could do in about 3 years all at once. So it does allow you to do that work all at once. The other thing it allows you to do, which pretty much every other district does, is as you pay down some of that debt, it allows you to essentially borrow on it again through additional bond issues without changing the tax rate. So you're able to make those cyclical investments. And that's really what we see across the county and across Missouri. Because if you go to, if you look across the county and you go back to 2001, most districts have done at least 3 to 4 bond issues over that time at no change in the tax rate. Some have done as many as 7 over that time. So it just allows you to do a cyclical investment there. So it just affords you a little bit more opportunity in the long term. But as you say, you do incur interest costs doing it.
And I guess one of the few bright spots of this COVID-19 is, I guess, interest rates are significantly reduced now. So I guess borrowing would be at one of the lowest rates probably in the history of the district.
Hopefully so.
Do you know approximately how much, you talked about safety at front entrances of all the schools, looking at that, just that being one of the major projects, about how much that would cost, an estimate?
No, we don't have that yet. Kind of along the process, we've involved our architects along the way, and over the last few months, probably 4 to 5, we've really been working with them on what those entrances could look like conceptually, so we can start doing those cost estimates. But we don't have a number right now. What I have heard from people across the country, though, before the COVID-19 pandemic, there was widespread talk about construction prices were really, really going up. Even in our area, some rural areas were seeing construction costs much higher than they were used to. And I talked to a guy from California back in November, and oh my God, he's outside of LA, and they were competing with construction for Olympic venue stuff. And I mean, what they were paying per square foot is, it was insane. It's like $1,000 a square foot is what he's paying to do some stuff on schools. But we'll probably end up, best guess is going to be in that probably 240 to 280 range would be my guess, based on what we were seeing back in the fall.
At one of our previous meetings, Marshall, we were talking about this a little bit, and the discussion that came up was the ability to manage all of the projects, and would we have the people in place if we automatically, you know, all of a sudden had $75 million to spend? Do we have the people to manage that level? And I know it would take a couple of years, but how would that work?
I'll probably let Dr. Gaines or Chad answer that, but we obviously cannot manage all of that in year one. So I don't know if the plan is to spread that out under Mike over several years or to get some outside help. Dr. Gaines or Chad, would you want to pitch in on that?
You bet. So Marshall's right. You know, we can't do $75 million worth of work in a summer. So it's going to have to be spread out over time. And that is a lot for our facilities department to manage. So we've been talking with our architects about what that could look like. You know, the district doesn't have a great history with kind of a construction manager. So we've been talking with the architects about probably the idea of an owner rep so that our facilities department, wouldn't be handling it directly, or Mike wouldn't handle it directly. But we would hire an owner rep and have additional people to kind of help with that. That's kind of what we've been talking about with the architect, but we don't have that definitively lined out at this point. But we can't handle that amount of work internally and manage it and all the other stuff that we do. We know that without a doubt. Any other questions? All right, then I guess I'll turn it back over to you, Marshall. Hey, Jeff and Jess, though, is it possible for us to jump on another meeting here in the next couple of minutes? There's some stuff brewing I need to talk to you guys about.
Yeah, I'm open, yes.
I can do it, but I need to leave the Zoom running, so we'll need a different platform.
All right, we can do it on Google Meet. I'll set that up real quick. Thank you, guys.
All right,
Thank you.
guys.
Thank you.
I think the next meeting is slated for May 12th, and that's when the Finance Committee would meet up with the Facilities Committee and get more specific into the project. So I think that's the next step. You might make sure that's on your calendar. If there's no questions, no further questions, then just would say
Marshall, can I
stay
ask you a
safe.
question? Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
What are you kind of looking at in terms of a balance? What would you look at in terms of for operations and facilities?
Well, I'm pretty conservative. If you know, there's a trade-off. So I mean, personally, if this would have, in a perfect world, I would really have preferred to have had a capital levy because I don't like to pay interest. And so, you know, let's say if we were going to put 25 cents away for a GO bond, you know, 25 cents for capital levy would be, you know, probably $4.5 million or so. So if you do $4.5 million per year, you know, if you're going to do that, but you know, it's going to just elongate the period. You're not going to pay interest. It's a trade-off. Do you want to pay interest and take a long time to get the projects done, or do you want to get it done right now? And that's really a judgment. If people are, it depends on how concerned the people are on the safety issues. And so I think there's a high degree of concern on the community about that. Well, if there is, we can't satisfy that in 2 or 3 years doing it the capital levy way. So, and as far as like how much, whether it's capital levy or GO bond, the bottom line is we do have a lot of capital needs, but that can be a black hole, so I think you have to, I think, and that's where, that's still to be determined, getting folks together to decide what the specific amount and the specific projects are going to be and what the payoff is. The more you put into capital projects, the less you have for the operations. We don't know what the revenue is going to be next year. With all of COVID-19, when are we going to get back to school? When are businesses going to open up? Are we going to go into a depression? Are we going to go into a recession? Are we going to have government? So we don't know what the sales tax is going to be for revenue next year. We don't know how many people are going to pay their taxes. If they don't pay their taxes, we don't get tax money. So there's a lot of uncertainties.
We're in uncharted waters, Marshall. And we're in a situation we really don't know what's going to happen 6 months from now.
Exactly. And I'm very conservative. So I'm very cautious of committing GO bond money to a ton of capital projects. But like Dr. Gaines said, 2 months ago or so, he had probably an amount in mind, and now it's a lesser amount. And I think that's wise. We have to be more conservative. So I think we are going to need, if we want to, what did we face when I first walked in the door in 2013? We barely had $5 extra to spend on pencils for the schools. And we went through a lot of cuts going into the Prop R days. It's been tight times. So I just think we've got to be very careful about how much we put into capital projects, but we have to put some stuff into capital projects. We're in dire need of some things, but I think that's why we need a good close look from the finance committee as well as the facility committee. Look to see what all of these months and months and months of work and priorities have come up with, and then just carefully assess, what is a really, really key need versus a want. And, we see what the cost is of the needs and see how much that leaves for operations. I think we're in the middle of the process still. And I think that's why you guys are going to be very important to be part of this. These are historical times for the district. When have we ever had $8 million to say, how do you want to divvy this out? You guys are right in the heart of this.
Well, something that we're going to need to do that Dr. Gaines mentioned, that frankly, as a finance committee, I think we're going to have to do some side planning and calculations. Dr. Gaines mentioned that I think he said $20 million of HVAC needs that will happen probably in 2026. So if we tie up everything in a GO bond starting now, we're going to have to make sure in our calculations and our planning of amortization of that GO bond, because we're not going to be able to fund with cash $20 million in HVAC projects. We're at a point where we can do an additional GO bond or something to fund those $20 million needs, because I sure don't want to be in a situation as a district from financially to come up on that and hoping and praying that those HVAC items last, beyond their expected life, and we end up in a cash bind because we've done this GO bond now and we don't have additional financing ability at that point in time with a no tax increase financing. So that's the one thing, Marshall, as we go down this path, we'll probably need LJ Hart's assistance to kind of assimilate how much of our not refinancing ability, but levy ability we would have to be able to go back to the voters with a no tax increase funding to try to fund that $20 million in HVAC needs, since we know those are coming.
That's a great point, Mark. And the one other thing for us to keep in mind is we have 4 cents on Prop A that sunset after 2025. So at today's rates, that could buy maybe like $12 million of GO bonds. But once again, that doesn't cover the whole 26, but just keep that in mind. And that might be a wonderful opportunity at that point too, to put those 4 cents into the permanent capital tax levy or capital levy that we mentioned before. But yeah, you're right. We've got to factor that in. So that's why, as we go through this process, we're not at the end. There's been a lot of homework to gather data, and now we pull people like the finance committee up to the table to start help looking at that data to help finalize the plan. So I think you guys are in a really, really key position to make some great contributions of finalizing this plan.
And Marshall, the other thing I think, and this is where, need board input, the allocation of that to the bonds versus operations is going to be key, because teachers and staff are going to be wanting to say, why should we be delaying, again, any kind of increase so that we can, put it all towards buildings. So there's been obviously progress and continued work on our scales, our salary scales, and that's going to need to be looked at and balanced as well in all of this.
Right. Yeah, we've got like Greg said, we're in uncharted waters. We don't know what our sales tax revenue is going to be. We don't know what our tax revenue is going to be. We don't know, what the personal, the real estate values are going to be in a year or two. A lot of it just depends on how the economy opens up and bounces back. And if businesses are down for a year, it's a lot different than if businesses are down for 1 or 2 months. So
is April the absolute last date that this can be taken to the voters as part of, is that the last time that this would have the chance to take a vote on this?
Well, I don't think so, but I'll let Kevin weigh in on that. I'm pretty sure that, like Dr. Gaines said, November is the earliest, and it's just a matter of, normally when you look at putting a plan like this together, you don't have a coronavirus to deal with. So you're thinking, okay, we can maybe do November, if not, maybe April. But now with this, we may have to rethink timing too. Kevin, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's all true. And because everything would roll into operations, we wouldn't necessarily be stopped if it were next April and it didn't go through from not going forward after that at some point, because it would still be in operations and it would still be a no tax increase to swap it. So hopefully it doesn't come to that, but if it did, we should be in a decent spot. There's one thing I wanted to add too, which is we also don't know what our student population is going to be next year. The last time we had a financial type crisis, we had a lot more kids coming to us from private schools, and with all the layoffs going on, all the damage this is doing to our economy, we probably should be expecting to see that again this coming year. So that probably is something else to throw in as a possibility for what costs might be, and we may have to be hiring more teachers in addition to trying to make sure we're paying the ones we have the right amounts.
The other thing that we're going to have to consider, and I don't know if DESE can give us any indication going forward, is this, hopefully the stock market bounces back quickly. But if the stock market doesn't bounce back quickly, it's going to really significantly harm the funding level of the teacher's pension. And we may be looking at increased state contributions for pension funding as well. They may assess an increase there.
Yeah, there's a lot of uncertainties. So we're I think that's why it's going to be very beneficial to get a lot of good minds together as we try to finalize this plan. So once again,
it's just that uncertainty is just what causes me to think, taking something as early as November. I know that's the earliest, but it's just, wow, taking something to the voters like that, I just think it's going to be tough sell when you know, people like Dr. James, people are unemployed. You know, they're talking about, you know, this thing could peak back up in the fall, and you know, if we that situation, it's just going to be a hurdle to
Right.
overcome.
Well, I think that's why Dr. Gaines was saying that, you know, as this whole process was going through, that was the earliest that the ballot would be. But, you know, every day is different for us now. Every single day, we're responding to changing circumstances from the COVID-19 situation. So, you know, while Dr. Gaines said that's the earliest, he's also not locked in on that being in concrete. And that's why he said that it's really going to be a discussion of the committee, you know, I guess the campaign committee, to try to figure all that out. So there are a lot of questions and a lot of uncertainties to sort of wade through. But, you know, really, once again, this is really the entry of you guys coming into this project, and hopefully be able to get some really good participation as we go forward and get you guys' input on this.
Marshall, if you had asked me 8 weeks ago, I would have said the perfect time would have been November. Everybody understands, especially the security needs of the schools. And I think it would have been a much easier sell. I like you said, I just don't know what everybody's thinking at this point, and we won't know, and things could change drastically, but even between now and, like you said, in October, November timeframe.
Yeah, I think there's, you know, there was a general thought of district management of sort of how we felt like this might go through and go forward. You know, we've never had anything like this happen where just the bottom drops out of, you know, just life. So we're really having to rethink a lot of things every day on just, you know, how do we teach a kid that's not coming to the school building, and how do we get kids fed, and how do we pay bills with 10 remote offices of the business office. And I mean, we're sort of rethinking things every day. So we're just sort of, we're finding our way through, but it's going to take time, and really going to really value a group of bright minds like yourself to help us on the
A bit of a logistics discussion at this point. One of the things that I think we're going to have to consider, I wish I'd thought of this when Dr. Gaines was on, but you know, with the timeline where he's talking potentially the board making a decision in June, for us to be able to give relevant advice financially about what makes sense to do and figure out how to balance the 26 million in HVAC needs down the road and those things. I'm a little worried about, just a heads up to you guys, a timeline. We may have to squeeze in a few meetings between that May 12th meeting that Dr. Gaines has scheduled and potentially giving some input to the board, because we're going to have to work through some numbers, I would think, to deal with what, you know, we're probably going to have to meet with LJ Hart. We're probably going to have to, you know, try to develop some understanding. If they keep that timeline intact, we're probably going to need to have, I don't know, at least 2 meetings. It wouldn't surprise me, between the May 12th meeting and when the board would need some input from us. So that's just something to keep in mind. And, you know, we may have to scramble a little bit here at the end of the process to make sure we're able to pull together enough information in order to be able to, you know, talk intelligently about how to manage those numbers and give some advice as to what we think the best way is.
Well, I think the challenge on that is, like, you know, right now we know roughly what, you know, the GO bond costs. You know, 1 penny generates $3 million, but the biggest thing is what's the next year budget going to look like? You know, I had a budget that I felt like was somewhat reliable, and I don't have any idea of what we're going to get now. So it's hard to even put a plan in place when you don't know what next year's finances are going to be. And then you throw in, like what Kevin said, and you know, when people lose their jobs and they're sending their kids to private school, you know, a lot of them, some of them aren't going to send their kids to private school, and it's going to go to public. What's the fallout on that? So that's sort of where we're at.
you've almost got to run a lot of scenarios.
Yeah.
Marshall, everything holding up with the infrastructure, the technology infrastructure? Everything's still going okay with online learning for the schools?
Well, that maybe Chad talked to the online learning. The technology in general for the business office piece is holding up. But Chad, do you have any comments on the educational side?
No, I think our focus has been more around making sure that a student in one school receives the same quality outreach as a student in another school. The pieces are all there so that we have the ability to communicate, and common expectations have been set and kind of deployed to the staff. We're just monitoring the deployment at this time and trying to support teachers and school communities that are kind of growing in their understanding of what needs to be accomplished.
Has our pivoting here created a need for any significant revisions to the budget for this school year, or any additional expenditures that are going to potentially impact cash position at the end of the year, Marshall?
Well, for this year, I don't have the tally quite yet, but I have a lot of the details, and I'm close to adding up. But it looks to me like overall we're going to be probably in a large favorable position. So I think because we're just not going to, there's going to be certain monies we're just not going to spend. Our revenue is pretty much fixed, so we're going to get what we're going to get. We're going to go ahead and pay everybody, their base salaries, but you're not going to have certain activity worker, and you may or may not have summer school salaries. I'm gonna, if you end up not going in the first part of June, we always split half of the summer school salaries, half June, half July. If that gets delayed, even if we have summer school, that all probably goes into next year, but it's just, Peter and Paul, Rob and Peter to pay Paul kind of a thing. But overall, we're going to be favorable this year. Next year, we're not, because, well, it's highly probable we're not going to be favorable. It's highly probable that some of those revenues are going to decrease. So that's the part that we're not sure of.
There's so many variables that we have to monitor. We've deployed thousands and thousands of Chromebooks. We have to do our best to make sure we get them back, and we get them back in decent condition. I've been around a while, and I remember our homeless students spiking when we last had the Great Recession, and that could create a pretty sizable impact on what student services needs to do with Marshall as well.
That's a great point, Chad. We spend, like right now, about $400,000 on homeless, but if that spikes, that could go up to $600,000. We made $600,000 on investment earnings just off of interest income of our cash balances. With the decrease, if interest slashes 80%, a few years ago, our high point was a year ago on interest income. We made $800,000 revenue off of interest income. That's basically money market interest. And our low point a few years ago was about $35,000. So it can range from $35,000 to $800,000. This year we're going to have probably around $600,000 revenue, but I would anticipate next year being a lot less just because of the interest rates. So Mark, one thing that, keep me posted on your thoughts as to when you want meetings, if you want any meeting before the May 12th, or if you want to, probably going to be best to possibly just see what the data is on May 12th before we start with additional meetings. But
I don't see any reason to meet until we have numbers to work with.
Okay.
So until we're at a point where Dr. Gaines is a little bit more concrete on, his plans and what the numbers might look like for maybe a GO bond. And, we've gotten some estimates from LJ Hart. I think that's potentially And it sounds to me like that'll be after the May 12th meeting to me. So that's why I'm saying logistically, we might need to squeeze in a couple meetings, you know, and it's not gonna be ideal because you're gonna have a holiday in late May and things like that, but we may need to squeeze in a couple of meetings in that last half of May potentially to work through numbers once they become available.
It's not like anybody's going to be going anywhere on the holidays, probably.
Yeah.
So our initial plan was to have all of the cost estimates for construction by next week. The shutdown and how that's impacted our partners and the architectural firm may see a little bit of a delay in that. But as information comes in, Marshall, I'll continue to feed it to you and look for your guidance.
That sounds good. Any other questions? All right. Well, guys, thank you very much. And if you have, if any of you want to reach out to the other committee members, or if you want me to do that, however you feel like is the best, just let me know. But this is pretty important, so I want to make sure the other 3 committee members, get some good updates as well. And otherwise, we'll see everybody on May 12th.
Are we shooting for the same time?
Chad, since this is a consolidated meeting, when does the facilities committee usually meet?
So our final meeting was supposed to be on April 14th. We're going to have a Zoom update because we have a lot of those folks reaching out to us saying, is our work going to be honored? And so we want to make sure that we stay in contact with them and let them know, not only what we found from their survey results in the last meeting, which went out today, and have some discussion of that, but the new challenges that are kind of presenting us and how that might cause us to need to change to some degree the original plan. It's that balance that you were talking about earlier, Marshall.
Right.
Sure that we have everybody on board with that balance.
Chad, when we, I know this is a detail that can be figured out later, but on May 12th, if we were all meeting, do you anticipate it being a 6 o'clock meeting time, or is that?
I have down 6:30. That's something Dr. Gaines had passed along previously. So
Yeah, so that would be consistent with the facility steering committee meetings that we've been having.
Okay. All right. And obviously there'll be detail invites going out on that when we get to closer to time.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right. Well, guys, thank you very much. And we'll talk on May 12th, most likely.
Thanks,
Stay
Marshall.
healthy.
Thanks, Marshall.
Stay safe, stay
Thanks,
healthy.
everybody.
thanks.